Alright, welding of steel pipelines. 255, 221 scope. 255, 225 to 245 with the prescribed minimum quantity welding steel materials and pipelines. These sections now apply with welding curve with the different manufactured steel with its pipeline components. Qualification welding procedure. Welders must perform the qualified weld of the welder operating in accordance with the welding procedure qualified under section 5, 12 and Appendix A or B of the American Petroleum Institute, Standard 1104, is described in Title 10.3 of the title, or Section 9 of the Association of American Engineer, Boiler and Vessel Codes, as described in Section 10.3 of the title, produced the welds meeting in the Section 255.21 through 245 of the quality of the test welds, qualified working procedure determined and strictly in accordance with the applicable welding standards. Each welding procedure must be recorded detailed will include the result of the qualifying test, and record must be retained filed whenever a procedure is used. Qualification of the welder. Except to provide in subdivision B with each of the welds of the welder operator must be in accordance with the section 6 and 12 of the Appendix A and B with the API Standard 1104, Section 9A as American Science Mechanical Engineering Boiler and Pressure Vessel Codes. However, the welder operator qualified earlier edition listed in Section 10.3 title may be weld but may not requalify under the earlier edition. Welder may qualify to perform weld on pipe to operate with a pressure less than 125 psi gauge performance. Acceptable test for what the welding process to be used. Under the test set forth in Section 1, Appendix 14F, each welder who makes a welder strip with a connection with the main must first perform an acceptable test under Section 2, Appendix 14.5 of its title, requirements of qualifying tests. Limitation on welders. No welder operator who qualifies B for the non-destructive testing may be compressor station pipe components. No welder operator may be particular welding unless the preceding 6 calendars. They're in the dryer.
No, these are the black ones, and I fixed them.
Alright, thank you.
I need the brown ones.
Okay.
Have they been washed?
Sorry about that. Welder qualified under Section 255, 227A of this part may not weld pipe operated with 125 psi or more unless 6 calendar years of the welder has one been tested and found acceptable under 612 of the Appendix A of the American Petroleum Institute Standard 1104. Alternately, welders and welder operators must maintain ongoing qualification status performing welding tests acceptable under above acceptable criteria at least once, twice each calendar year, but intervals not exceeding 7.5 months. Welding operator qualified in earlier edition standard 10.3 with the title may weld but not be requalified in an earlier edition. May not weld pipe to be operated pressure less than 120 psi gauge. Welder operator test in accordance with paragraph C1 of the section requalifiers on paragraph D1 of the section. Welder under section 255, 227 of the B welder part may weld unless, which preceding 15 calendar months, the welder has requalified except the welding operator requalifies at least once each calendar year. When the preceding 7.5 calendar months, at least twice each calendar year, welder operator has a production welding cutout tested and found acceptable in accordance with the qualifying test. Production weld was tested, found acceptable under Section 6 of API Standard 1104, described in Section 10.3 of the title. For welders, work only on surface lines of 2 inches or smaller in diameter. 2 sample welds were tested and found acceptable. When the test Section 3, Appendix 14.5 of the title, welder requalification should be required with a good cause. Questions welder's ability. Quality Assurance Program. Each operator should conduct the unannounced spot check with each of the welders' field weld at least once each calendar year to assess the quality of the work. Such spot check would include the destructive and non-destructive tests of the field weld should be announced in the spot check with the welder identified on the weld follow up the unannounced spot check for the conduct for 3 months as soon as possible thereafter. Field weld chosen with the unannounced spot check may be used to maintain welder qualification test found acceptable under Section 3 and 6 for the API Standard 1104, in Section 3 of the 3 for welders qualified under Section 225, 227A of this part. In the case of the welder qualified under Section 255, 227B of this part, spot check must be filed with the test procedure section 14.5 of the title. The unannounced test may be used to satisfy the requirement of the welding test during the 6 month preceding welding as required in 225, 229C or D of this part. Alright, 255, 231, protection of the weld. The welding operator must protect with weather conditions which impair the quality of the completed weld. Miter joints, 233. Miter jointing on steel pipe operator the pressure of the produce the hoop shaft with 30% of the system yield the strength with made flex with the pipe for more than 3 degrees. Miter joint on the steel pipe operator the pressure produce the hoop shaft less than 30% of the more than 10% of the system yield the strength made effect pipe more than 12 degrees and 12.5 degrees but make a distance equal to one pipe diameter more wave for the other miter joint is measured and a crotch of each for the joint. The miter joint or steel pipe the operator with the pressure produce the hoop shaft with 10% is less than system yield strength deflect of the pipe more than 90 degrees. Preparation of the welding. Before beginning any of the welding surface must be clean free of the name of the tail detrimental to the weld pipe. Component must be aligned to provide most favorable condition depositing of the root bead. The alignment must be preserved with the root bead is deposited. See Appendix 14C with the title Acceptable Preparation of Butt Weld Piping on Equal Thicknesses. 37 to 39 have been repealed. Inspection of test welds 241. Visual inspection of the weld must be conducted with an individual qualified appropriate training with experience with ensure the welding is performed in accordance with the welding procedure. The weld acceptable under subdivision C of the section. But welds each pipeline nominal diameter greater than 2 inches for the operator with a 125 psi gauge or more must be non-destructive test in accordance with section 255, 243, 243 of this part. Acceptable weld non-destructive test visually inspect the determine the corner of the chain. Section 9 Appendix A API standard 1104 described in 10.3 with the title. However, the girth of the weld unacceptable to understand with the region of the crack and Appendix A with the API standard 1104 apply with the weld. Acceptable with the weld may be further determined under an appendix. Non-destructive test pipeline to operate at 120 psi gauge or more. Non-destructive test when performed on any of the parts of the other tree panning will clearly indicate the defect that might be the integrity of the weld. The non-destructive test might be performed in accordance with the procedure by a person who is trained, qualified, and established. Procedure the equipment employed with the testing procedure must be established proper to interpretation of each of the non-destructive test welds ensuring acceptable with the weld under 255 241C with its part. The percentage each day each field bullets selected to be random by operator non-destructive test and entire circumference. Class 1 at least 10%, Class 2 at least 15%, Class 3 and 4 100%, Class 1 and 2 location crossing major navigable rivers that crossing major roads, railroads, public highway right-of-ways include tunnel bridge overhead road crossings 100% and pipeline tie-ins, placement sections 100% except for the welder welding operator who works as isolated principal welding activity sample. Each welder's work for each day must be non-destructive tested. Each operator must retain a life of the pipeline cord showing with a mile post engineering station geographical feature for the number of the girth welds made, number of the non-destructive tested, the number projected for the deposition of the rejections. Alright, 255, 244 welding inspection. No person carrying out the inspection of the welding pipelines required in section 255, 241, and 243 with a person qualified with the appropriate training and experience to evaluate acceptable weld joint points per requirement of section 6 of standard acceptability of American Petroleum Institute 1104. As described in section 10.3 of the title, H Gas Corporation establishes the key on fire inspection methods used to verify the qualification of each technician responsible for the interpretation of each of the non-destructive tests or weld. Inspecting pipelines operated with 125 psi gauge or more, the welder may not inspect his own weld for the purpose of determining the acceptability of the welds required section 255, 241 of this part. Repair and removal of defects. 255, 245, repair and removal of defects. Each weld is unacceptable under section 255, 241C, but must be removed. The repaired welder must remove it if it has a crack that is more than 8% of the width of the length of the 2 inches length of which is less, penetrates either the root or second bead. Each weld of the repaired must have the defective removed down sound metal segment of the repaired must be preheated. Conditions exist which would adversely affect the quality of the weld repair after the repair. The segment of the weld was repaired by inspected to ensure acceptability. Repairs on the pipelines operate at 125 psi gauge more, non-destructive inspect with the meet standard of the 6, section 6 of API standard 1104, section 10.3 with the title. If the repairs are not acceptable, the weld must be removed. And that covers welding of steel pipelines.